Welcome back to the Dynasty Nerds YouTube page. I am Garret Price, and I'm excited to talk a little college football, a little 2025 class, and I brought in the expert, Mr. Tristan Cook. Tristan, how you doing, my man?
I'm doing pretty well. We got football here in full swing of things, and it's an exciting time to be, football like 5 days of the week. You can't complain with that.
No, you cannot complain at all. And I'm sure there would be college football more days of the week, or NFL football, or some sort of football, if there weren't all those limitations in place. I'm pretty sure the NFL would have a game like every night if they could. But
I'm sure they would.
I'm sure they would. But with that being said, we are going to talk a little 2025 class. And this happens every year. You have players coming in that you're like, oh, these guys are going to be studs. They're going to be at the top of everyone's board. And they fall and tumble and don't do as well as we think. Then you have other guys where we had no idea who these players were. Maybe we had an idea of who they were, but they just way outperform expectations. So that's what we're going to talk about today. 5 risers and fallers from college football this season for the 2025 class. So let's start off with the positive, and then we'll work our way to the negative. So Tristan, give me the first guy that you have as a riser for this year's class.
Yeah, the first guy I have is Ashton Jeanty. It's not that he was completely unknown, like you're saying. In fact, a lot of people were kind of high on him, if not their top running back, in the discussion. And he really just has come out and even outperformed kind of the hopes and expectations that everybody had. Done it against all levels of competition. He looked great against Oregon. I have him as my second running back. He's not the top one. I have a little bit of, I think I'm kind of the outlier on that, but he has looked amazing. Like it wouldn't shock me at all if he's the first running back off the board. I don't think he'll be a first round running back. I just kind of shy away from ever expecting that without these kind of like all world athletes that we see every handful of years. I don't think he's quite there, but I think he's going to be really good, probably, in that like 33 to 40 range off the board in the NFL draft. And, he's going nowhere but up right now.
Yeah, well, he's definitely putting up all-world numbers. Guy rushing in 3 games for nearly 600 yards, 9 touchdowns. And this last game, he kind of took it easy. He only rushed the ball 11 times, still had 127 yards on the game. So he could have put up video game type numbers once again, but took it easy on those guys. But you're right. We've seen some big games against lower competition, but even against Oregon, he put up over 100 plus yards, 3 touchdowns. Like, he's been absolutely unreal. So yeah, definitely rising up people's boards. I know that you have some quarterbacks that are on your list of risers as well. What quarterbacks do you have on that list?
I do. The first one, or the biggest riser, I guess, for me is Cam Ward, the quarterback out of Miami. He was supposed to be, kind of exploding onto the scene player a couple years ago when he transferred up from Incarnate Word to the former Pac-12, now the 2-pack at Washington State. And he didn't play terribly, but he wasn't that exciting. He didn't look that special. He'd have moments here and there. And then this last offseason, he transferred to Miami and has just come out setting the world on fire. So, he's probably, I don't know if he's the favorite for the Heisman. He's got to be close to it.
I believe he is odds-wise right now.
Yeah, I know. It's got to be close. I mean, it's pretty much a quarterback award, unfortunately, as a Colorado fan, which we'll get to Travis Hunter in a minute. But yeah, Cam Ward's looked amazing. He's looking like he's going to be a first-round pick. Inching his way, I think, into the discussion as potentially the top quarterback, or one of the, dealer's choice of the top few quarterbacks, where I think coming into the year, it was a maybe he could sneak into the first. And right now it's looking like that's pretty much a lock, and he might be, moving up into the early first discussion.
Yeah, absolutely. It's an interesting quarterback class right now. There are a lot of names that are good players, but always have a but. Like he's good, but he has this, but like we don't have that Caleb Williams, Drake May from last year. Where going into the season, we knew those were like foregone conclusions. They're going to be top tier quarterbacks. It was just who else is going to be added to them. This was
Yeah.
not one of those years. We knew about Shador, we knew about Carson Beck, but they've both had their moments. They've had some really good moments. They've both had kind of like times as well. But you have a different quarterback other than those two that was rising up your board. A guy from the state of Alabama, right?
I do. Jalen Milroe. I personally am not the biggest believer in his like NFL passing ability currently. But we saw another similar example of a very athletic Alabama quarterback that came to the NFL and figured out enough of the passing. Jalen Hurts. He obviously transferred out of Alabama in the middle there, but Jalen Milroe's, I think, improving as a passer enough that his athleticism, he's a really strong, powerful runner. That part will translate, I think, easily. And if he's kind of continuing on the trajectory where he's looking good, against the top competition this week, he gets Georgia. It wouldn't shock me to see him continue to rise up into that kind of QB 3 to 4 discussion. I don't know that he'll get there for me without kind of some big changes, but I kind of, what is being said around the, draft community, draft Twitter, whatever you want to call it. And from some people that I think are much more plugged in than, I currently am for sure. He is going up a lot of draft boards and people are really interested to see what he can do at the NFL level.
Yeah, absolutely. He's a freak athlete. We know that he's a freak athlete. We'll see if all of the passing game stuff can come together. Speaking of freak athletes, I know you're a Buffs fan. You put Travis Hunter on this list. Look, as a guy that's one of the biggest names in college sports, I don't know how much room he had to rise, but you have him on your risers list. Why is that, Tristan?
I do. And I mean, that's a fair point. Like, it wasn't that he was an unknown. It wasn't that people didn't think he was really good. But I think he is just proving that he can play wide receiver at the NFL level, which is what matters for us. I think, I try to stay as unbiased as I can being a Buffs fan, but I've been to all of the games since well before they were relevant when they were a one-win team. And so,
sure.
Many years ago. So seeing him live in person is pretty different than a lot of the other prospects. But mostly it's just that he's showing he can play the wide receiver position, at a top level. I think that, there's quite a few really good wide receivers in this class. There's no one like him. There's no one like Ted McMillan, but he came in kind of as if not the top guy, right there with it. And there were a lot of people that kind of just, I don't want to say dismiss Travis Hunter as a fantasy option, but were kind of apprehensive or just not too interested in him at the NFL level because they thought he was going to end up being a cornerback. I still think he's going to play on both sides of the football, but I think his wide receiver kind of perception really has gone up this year, and just seeing like, okay, we always talk about generational talents and prospects and whatever, but I think he's the best player in the entire country at the college level right now. I don't think it's particularly close. Just what he's doing all over the field. So I think he has risen up in a lot of fantasy people in their mindset, or at least he should be, because I think he's going to be able to replicate kind of this both sides of the football, especially on offense at the NFL level.
It's crazy to see if you're out there and you're watching this and you haven't seen Travis Hunter play. This, like, the ability to be able to play Division I college football, you have to be a freak athlete, B, a student of the game, and C, just be in phenomenal shape. The fact that he is able to play both sides of the ball with getting basically no breaks. It's not like, yeah, I'll play a series here and a series there of offense, but it's mostly defense or vice versa. He's out there basically every single snap. He's missed what, a handful, like 10, 12 snaps all season. Like
Pretty much.
he's
Yeah.
out there basically every play, which is just unreal. Speaking to his work ethic and what he's able to accomplish. So
Yeah.
fantastic guy.
One other fun stat along those lines is, and I don't know what it has been yet this year, but last year he averaged like 114 plays a game. And I think the top receivers in last year's class averaged like less than 70. It's like in the mid 50s were most of them, and he's out here playing 115 roughly like plays a game and doing it at a top level. So, we like to throw out generational talent or, once in a like lifetime prospect, or this guy's super unique. He really seems to be
Yeah.
somebody that we haven't seen in a very long time, if really ever. We've seen duals like both sides of the football athletes, but they don't ever really go on to the NFL and do it.
Sure.
I think he's got a good chance to do it.
Very fun. You've got one guy that is probably the most under the radar of all of the risers here. Guy out of Cincinnati, right?
Yeah, Xzavier Henderson. He's actually a former recruit that went to Florida and then transferred to Cincinnati. Kind of underwhelming until this year, really. He didn't have a lot of opportunity. There wasn't a lot of great quarterback play at Florida. You can make a million excuses for him, but he this year is just kind of blossoming and putting up big numbers. The athletic pedigree is there. I think he's like 6'3", 200, I think 210 maybe, roughly, that he's listed at. I mean, those measurables always come out. The truth comes out with them at the combine and in the pro days.
Yeah.
But he's a little different than a lot of the receivers. He's not quite, he's not on the tier of the top guys, but I think that he is somebody that is going to be a little surprising, might get drafted, in the third round of the NFL draft, and people will kind of be like, who, where, what? Like, and so I think he's someone that has put himself like firmly into an NFL like roster picture rather than maybe being a late day 3 guy that hopes to make a roster. I think he's going to be, if he goes to a good team or a good opportunity on a team, he could be someone that, is a really big value later in rookie drafts.
Absolutely. Let's go to the other side now, the one that's a little darker, a little more depressing, and let's talk about the guys that have really fallen off this season. And there are 2 names that would have probably been in a lot of people's top 5 running backs coming into the season, and arguably the consensus number 1 running back. You have both those guys as fallers. Who is that?
I do. Ollie Gordon and Donovan Edwards really have just fallen flat on their faces week after week this year, and it's been disappointing. I mean, I really was excited about Ollie Gordon. I wasn't quite as excited on Edwards coming into the year, but I definitely had him higher than he is now, and thought that he had an opportunity to step into a bigger role and put himself firmly into like the maybe the bottom part of the top tier of running backs, if that makes sense, kind of that running back 4-ish range. And now, I think he's dropped down to like my running back 8 or 9. Edwards really hasn't been able to do anything as a runner. He still can, get you some production receiving wise, but that's not at all what we were hoping for and kind of expecting. And then Ollie Gordon has just looked bad. There's not really a good way to put it other than he's just struggled kind of week after week. He's had, maybe a couple moments here where you're like, okay, this is it, let's get going. And then it just doesn't happen. And so I had him as my second running back to start the season. He's all the way down at my 6th running back right now. Just kind of, I don't want to say free falling, but there's only a couple of threads holding him up from going into a free fall, because it's just hasn't looked good for him.
Yeah, and it's tough when there's a good class of a lot of running backs that are performing and doing some big things. We already mentioned Ashton Jeanty, got guys like Hampton and the two guys from Ohio State. And there's a lot of good running backs in this class. So to falter right now in a year like this, it's a tougher one. So give me who else you got. You've got a few more for me. Who are the other guys that are falling in this 25 class?
Yeah, two quarterbacks on the list that were kind of coming into the year hoping to vault themselves into, a potential like day two, maybe get drafted as a potential starter in the NFL, maybe higher than that. The first one is Connor Weigman from Texas A&M. He's hurt right now, which doesn't help, but he looked bad before he got hurt. He was the one I think that a lot of people were expecting to kind of step up and have like a big breakout season. And maybe, I think the biggest fans of him were hoping he could get into the first round. I think a more realistic was a second to third round quarterback, which we've seen, become something at the NFL level. So certainly somebody that was on the radar, but he really has, fallen from there to the point where I don't know that he's going to even come out this year. He does have a year to go back, so that might be best for him. But there's also a realistic chance that when he comes back, he might end up having to transfer for next year just to be guaranteed a starting position. And that's just kind of the writing's on the wall at that point that, you might not end up having the NFL career that you were hoping to have. And so he's probably the biggest faller of quarterbacks for me. And then the other one, like I said, is Riley Leonard. He transferred to Notre Dame from Duke, kind of with the expectation of, getting on a bigger stage, some better talent around him, and hopefully kind of playing himself into, again, a chance to be an NFL starter or at least compete for that level of a position. And he's just not, I don't think he's good enough to be an NFL player or starter. I mean, he'll probably get drafted late. He'll probably sit on, in a quarterback room and be maybe a career backup, but for fantasy purposes and dynasty purposes, he's nearly written completely off for me. He's an athlete, but the talent isn't there anywhere enough as a thrower to get him into an NFL team.
Well, which is a bummer because we saw him as a very good athlete and making a lot of plays with his feet at Duke. But we did want to see that kind of that ability to be able to win inside the pocket as well as outside the pocket. And so far, we definitely have not seen that. All right. Last but not least, give us the final faller that you have right now in this 2025
class. So the last guy I have on my list is Evan Stewart, who is coincidentally also a former Texas A&M player. He transferred to Oregon this year. A lot of people, at least that kind of in the circles that I pay attention to, and myself included, were super high on him, thinking that, he was kind of a sneaky guy to end up being the first wide receiver off the board. He's much more of a wide receiver that you see in today's NFL. He's not the Teteroa McMillan, big physical receiver. He's much more, I think he's like 5'11", 6 foot, something like that, right around 200, a little under, like I don't want to say finesse, but his game is very different. That fits, a lot of what you see the top receivers in the NFL. He transferred to Oregon, like I said, after kind of some fallout with the coaching change and the chaos that was at Texas A&M, and he just hasn't clicked with Dillon Gabriel and Oregon's offense. He's getting outperformed by one of the other receivers, Tez Johnson, on his own team, and just kind of at this point, like, I assume he's still going to declare. Usually these guys will declare and just go try to prove it at the combine and hope they get drafted at a decent round. I thought he had a real good chance to be the top receiver or in that group with, for me at least, McMillan, Hunter, and Stewart were kind of my top three going into the season. and he is just kind of free falling from there. I haven't gone through and updated my wide receiver rankings. I'm working on a running back ranking article, and receiver is the next one up. So I can't tell you exactly where I have him, but I'm guessing like in that 7-ish range, which, it's still draftable. It's still relevant, but it's also falling to the point where if he doesn't do much the rest of the year, he could be way down the list by the end of the season.
Perfect. Well, Tristan, I appreciate you coming on. It's good. We don't always get to talk 2025 class until the season is over. So it's good to kind of keep an eye on this and just know where our picks are going, the guys that I need to be paying attention to and watching. So appreciate you coming on and giving us all that info. Tristan, you want to let us know real quick where they can find you and all the stuff that you're working on?
Yeah, absolutely. On Twitter, or X, formerly known as Twitter, you can find me at the Tristan Cook. I put out a couple of articles every week. One is a college article, comes out Fridays or Saturdays, depending on the week. And it kind of goes through all of the top prospects that are playing that week. So, Saturday, if you're sitting down to watch some football, or you happen to have a game on and you want to know kind of the NFL prospects that you should be aware of, that article goes through all the nationally televised games and highlights the players that you need to know. I do a wide receiver start sit for the NFL that comes out Saturdays. And then what I'm working on right now, like I mentioned, is positional rankings. So we're gonna have soon, quarterback, running back, wide receiver, tight end, early midseason positional rankings, and then at the end of the year, we'll have kind of a refresh of them and see where they go, and as the draft process moves along. So yeah, that's what I'm working on. Football never stops. And this is my favorite time of the year. I think in like a couple of weeks, we get Maction on Tuesdays. So it's really just Wednesdays that we won't have football. So this is prime time for me.
So wild. Tuesday games. So wild.
Yeah.
Well, Tristan, no, you're good, man. I appreciate you. Thank you so much for giving us your time and giving us your wisdom.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
For sure. Make sure to stay tuned in here to the Dynasty Nerds YouTube page. Go ahead and post in the comments who's rising and falling for you in the 2025 class. We'll let you know our thoughts as well in those comments, and we'll see you guys next time.